This episode of A Glass Blower's Companion is brought to you by Mountain Glass Arts. For the month of October 2019, Mountain Glass is offering their Boro sale. North Star and Troutman, first odds, seconds, and Frit at 30% off. No coupon code needed. Again, that's North Star and Troutman, firsts, odds, seconds, and Frit at 30% off. Do not sleep on this sale. This is a fantastic sale. It is October. They have lots of tricks and lots of treats, but this one is definitely a treat. And for all you beautiful soft glass nerds, they have their monthly sale. They have their jewelry making essentials at 25% off. All you need to do is use the coupon code JEWELRY, that's JEWELRY. And they also have a bunch of kiln sales, torch sales, all kind of fun things going on, as well as all kind of good information. Anything else you need for Mountain Glass, just give them a call or go to mountainglass.com. That's mountainglass.com. This is the Wise Guy Radio Show, a podcast dedicated to educating and inspiring through conversations with today's top talents in the world of glass.
The haunting's free, so hurry back, we would like your company.
Hey, what's happening? Welcome to A Glass Blower's Companion, Episode 7. This is your host, Jason Michael. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Today is featuring Luke Zimmerman esq. He's a lawyer, trademark and copyright and cannabis lawyer in the state of Oregon, as well as, I believe, trademarks in California. He talks about all that here in the very beginning, intro-wise. Just recently had played a highlights best of reel episode featuring past episodes that he had come on, where we talked about cannabis laws at that time, as well as trademark and copyright infringement ideas and concepts and laws, things that we all have to keep our eyes on, because if you're making things that are IPs, intellectual properties of other companies, you're making a profit off of it, you are then potentially putting yourself in position to become getting cease and assist orders or having to go to court, like all kind of stuff you could run into legal-wise. So just things to think about when you're out there. Ideally, I would say as you become a creative and you understand this medium, that you come up with your own thing and not make what other intellectual properties out there have. As difficult as it might be to not want to make those kind of things, because I completely understand, because I know I've done it myself and probably will do it in the future. But having also worked over at the Mouse House where I am now and understanding the IPs and what we had to go through with licensing as our company that I work for, it's interesting kind of seeing behind the scenes, but also then going on Instagram or Facebook or whatever and seeing things being created that are properties of other big major companies that can take everything you have. So it's just something to think about. We don't want to scare you and put the fear of God into you, but at the same time, we just want to make sure that you understand that ignorance is not bliss when it comes to this type of stuff and what we're talking about. But a lot of positive things are happening within the world of cannabis, and whether it's federal laws here in our country, international laws are changing, all kind of fun things are going on. So this conversation you're about to listen to with Luke is, again, it's an updated here current. I'm recording this right now on Monday. It is now September 23rd, which is crazy. It's almost October already. But this, by the time you're listening to this, is going to be October. So anyways, I just want to put that out there. And also, by the time you listen to this, Glassroots in North Carolina just ended. And hope, but as we hear things about that show, hopefully I'm going to get my ass up there and go visit it as well. I'm trying to time-wise get off work to make a little trip up there to see what's going on in there in that industry. Would love to go up there and visit. But that being said, just to kind of recap what's been going on in this industry, just make sure you are keeping your shit together and your ass covered. So important. Also, don't forget to check out our sponsors out there. And we got Mountain Glass as well as the Flow magazine. They all have some great things going on for this industry. Mountain Glass has all the supplies in the world you need. If you don't find it there, I'm sure they can find it for you. They also have price matching. So if you go somewhere else and you find something you like and you can go Mountain Glass, and Mountain Glass has a little bit more expensive price for it, you can let them know that they have that same product somewhere cheaper and they will match it for you. And they also have just anything and everything you need, as well as the best customer service on earth. And they're also expanding out into the West Coast, which is amazing. It just shows that this glass world that we all live in is also expanding, kind of like my waistline is. So, with all that being said, I'm going to stop rambling here and let you get on with this episode because this is a bunch of important information. I would suggest getting out a pen and paper, take some notes as well. And just because Luke's got lots of cool stuff that we talk about, especially towards the end. It was an exciting conversation. So anyways, thanks so much for y'all tuning in. Don't forget, again, as always, please, if you can, it helps out the show tremendously. It's one thing you can do to help support the show for free, which is just leaving a small review, whether it's hitting that 5-star review on your app or also going to and leaving a written review. It also gives me insights on your opinion on this show. I'd like to know what you think about this new branding change, the intros, all the things I've been doing. Always enjoy the feedback from you, and it means a lot. You have no idea how much it means to me. I could tell you all day long, but it still means more than I can actually explain. Hence why I've been doing this show now for almost 5 years, which is crazy. But also, let your friends and family know. You can share one of your favorite episodes, take a screenshot, share it on your Instagrams, tag us at a Glassblowers. It's actually just Glassblowers Companion on Instagram. You can tag us in there. Would love to see that. So I hope you all enjoy this interview with Luke Zimmerman. I have all of his information in the show notes. If you need someone to talk to for legal advice, seek out an attorney in your area, or you can contact Luke Zimmerman as well. He has a brain full of knowledge to help you out. So take care, enjoy. We'll talk to you next time. Peace. What's going on, Luke? Welcome back to the show, brother.
Hi, I'm happy to be back. Thanks for having me. It's been way too long.
Yeah, man. I'm glad we finally made this work. A lot of phone tagging and back and forth and misschedulings and Burning Man and all kind of shit going on. We are busy. So, so I just recently played a best of kind of highlights of some previous episodes talking about cannabis laws and trademark and copyright laws and all the things that are happening within the industry and in the world of cannabis in general. And definitely excited to kind of update things because there has been a lot of changes and a lot of things have gone down since then, including legalization for states for recreational, medical, etc. And definitely excited to talk about this, man.
I'm really excited to catch up with you too, and there is a lot to cover because since I was on last, there has been a lot of legal shifts for both cannabis and then inadvertently also for the glass pipe industry, just as it relates to the cannabis industry.
Oh, yeah.
But to start off, I need to do a statement. Any of the information that I'm going to share does not create an attorney-client relationship between me or any of the listeners. If any of the information seems like it is directly going to impact your life, I encourage you to seek legal representation because especially dealing with things like intellectual property, it's hard to work backwards. If there seems like there's something that is applicable to you right now, seek legal representation from an attorney who has a background in dealing with intellectual property issues. And yeah, let's get into it.
Hell yeah, dude. So we kind of made some topics talking about some stuff. So I mean, I guess really wherever you want to begin, let's do it.
Well, okay. Let's go with, broadly speaking, I like California. I'm probably because I'm focused on practicing there, and things that are new in California. Since we last spoke, California has started accepting trademarks directly for cannabis goods and services. This actually started January 2nd, 2018. I am proud to say that I believe I successfully registered the first trademark for cannabis in the history of California, where I flew down and hand submitted my applications at the Secretary of State office, and I had to elbow some people out of the way to do my filings. But yeah, it's fascinating because it is changing the ability for brands and businesses to develop a brand in California, which arguably is probably the hottest market in the world for a cannabis business. So now we're starting to see, because we're a year, almost 2 years past that, there's a lot of brand fighting that is starting to occur. Because there was an amendment allowing for registration for cannabis goods and services, you could actually register, if you're in California right now and you're a glass maker, you could register directly on bongs and pipes for a dab rig, or I have this pipe for smoking cannabis. You can do that in California now if you have a brand or if you have a glassblower name or a moniker. Um, so that's a big change, and I encourage people to do that. What I'm seeing, especially because federally, you still can't get a trademark as it relates directly to cannabis goods or services, which also then means if you're filing on a pipe, there's a chance that you're going to have it denied because it's going to be alleged to be paraphernalia. But because you can't get a national trademark, you're having, and I'm seeing this especially in the cannabis space, you register trademarks state by state, which is creating an issue where if somebody is in Alaska and they register a state trademark and someone's in California and they register a state trademark and both of them want to expand into Oregon, uh, there becomes an issue of who gets there first, who does the first successful registration, and there is a really perfect scenario for doing a legal battle or having litigation around who owns what part of the trademark. So that's becoming very commonplace in the industry. I'm also seeing a lot more counterfeit goods, which is really wild, where brands that have had some success are now getting knocked off by people who are in the illicit market. And that's becoming a real issue too of trying to monitor that. So I would say that's one of the big shifts, but that impacts me personally because I'm working with trademarks in California. Um, let's think about other things that are an issue. The vape stuff that's going on right now. Looking at this, how federally the vape industry is really is being closely paid attention to because of I think it's at 7 deaths right now. And we're likely to see a large policy shift here in the near future. I know that there's a lot of stores that are not carrying some vape goods. I know the federal government is making more statements about how they're going to ban flavored vape goods. I think this is a little ironic because I don't think any of the 7 deaths related to goods that were really sold that had any sort of FDA regulation or I got the impression from what I've been seeing that a lot of these things are either CBD distillate or THC cartridges that are pretty akin to being in the illicit market. I don't think they're actually through licensed companies.
Interesting.
So I don't know if this regulation really is going to have the intended impact because I don't actually think it's flavored cartridges that are really creating the issue. So, but I do know that at least 3 of the companies have been identified and are being investigated by the FDA right now. Other things that are new, CBD. People are into it.
Yeah.
Hot market right now. Personally, I think it's a bubble. There's also a ton of misinformation about it. CBD legalization occurred December 23rd, I want to say, 2018, when the Farm Bill was signed into effect, which changed the definition or removed hemp from being identified as cannabis sativa, so is no longer a Schedule 1 narcotic, and allowed for derivatives from the hemp plant so long as the hemp plant was 0.3% or less THC by dried biomass to be used. So we have this explosion of CBD market, with the caveat that the FDA still has not approved any of that for ingestion. There are ingredients in goods that are called GRAS, or generally regarded as safe, and they are starting to review CBD as an additive, but it has not been approved yet. So one of the big shifts is if I want to file a federal trademark on a CBD topical or a lotion that's infused with CBD, I would be allowed to right now, and there is a possibility that can be registered, so long as it comes from 0.3% or less THC, or hemp with 0.3% or less THC. But if I wanted to file on, say, a gummy edible that's infused with CBD, that is still going to be denied because it is not an appropriate food additive.
Huh, interesting.
So there's a lot of miscommunication there because those products are now being sold at stores across the nation. The legal parameter around that is still gray at best, and if anything, it just seems like so many people are doing it that it's not being challenged or not being policed. But per the federal government's view, it's still not approved. It's still not a FDA sanctioned good that's in commerce.
Right.
So going for things that are ingested or that are infused with CBD, I think Oregon is the last state in the nation to allow beverages to be infused with CBD. I kind of get a kick out of this because I can go down to a donut shop that is a few blocks away from my house and have a CBD infused donut. I can get a CBD infused coffee. But when I go to California, the only way to get CBD is I have to go to a dispensary. I feel like for being in Portland, most bars either have a CBD cocktail or they'll have a CBD soda on their menus. So that's a big shift. I know a lot of people are trying to get into the infused beverage game because there has been a lot of reports that this is going to be a expanding market.
Yeah, I would see that. Yeah, for sure.
Especially being able to do it in a social setting.
Well, just else? On that same note, though, it makes me think about like kombucha, for instance, because it has a small percentage of alcohol. And I've been ID'd for buying kombucha. So are they going to make it so that you have to be 21 and up to be able to go into a CBD bar, for instance, and have a cocktail or have a brownie?
So that's where I have not. And granted, I have a very robust beard, and I do look much closer to middle age than youthful at this point. So I've not been ID'd for any CBD products, but I don't know what the protocol is. Like, would this donut shop, if a 15-year-old kid walked in and said, "I want to buy this donut," would they deny him the sale? I don't actually know.
Yeah, I'm curious.
But especially a lot of the places where I see it here in Portland is at bars. So already, you're not going to have kids in there, but there are enough coffee shops also that do additives, for $5 we'll do a squirt. I actually saw that Jason Harris had a branded CBD line that was being sold at a coffee shop kind of close to my place that I thought was kind of crazy.
That is.
But yeah, so I think time will tell what that is for the marketplace. I know there is an immense amount of hemp being cultivated here in Oregon for the purpose of CBD extraction. So I don't know what saturation in that marketplace looks like. I think there is a lot of confusion about the demand, and that's why I do think it's a bubble effect. What I also am not hearing as much of is people cultivating hemp for fiber to be used in textiles or for seeds to be used in oils or other products. It seems to be really CBD focused. So my thought is after the CBD bubble pops, people are going to shift to other cultivars of hemp that have more of a diverse range of use.
Yeah, it would make sense.
Time will tell on that one.
Yeah, especially it's such a good in-between crop. There's so much benefit from hemp alone. Okay, it's just, it's like...
Yeah, I'm of the belief that we're kind of just skimming the surface still of the diversity of uses for the plant. And I think because cannabinoids are so new to people understanding what they do, that's really been the focus. Mm-hmm. Where I'm hearing occasional stories about how a lot of, I think it was, I'm going to blank on the wood type, but there were factories that were retrofitting to process hemp fiber and compress it into wood, or wouldn't be wood board, but hemp board. Huh. And I think as that comes online more, we're going to see that utility kind of manifest where, maybe you do hemp flooring, or I can use hemp board instead of using any wooden board when I'm constructing a house.
Right, like bamboo or something.
Exactly. And I think those demands, the actual revenue generation from the plant are going to be much higher in that regard.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So, One thing I wanted to cover was an issue with copyright. This is kind of near and dear to me right now because I am enrolled in another master's program through a school in Turin, Italy, that has direct ties to the World Intellectual Property Organization, or it's considered a WIPO Academy. But I'm in my first month of studies, and we're focused on copyright issues, especially as they're applied through international treaties, looking at the Berne Convention, looking at the TRIPS Agreement, looking at the WTO Copyright Treaty. But back in 2016, there was an issue in Oregon with Hitman Glass and Evil Glass creating the infamous Dabachino rig. And that I actually use this case still when I teach at Oaksterdam in my copyright section, because it was a great illustrator of how there are copyright issues that are being brought in the cannabis industry now. And because the logo, this is also for anyone who has what they consider a logo or a trademark, so long as there's artistic expression in your logo, you can also register it as a copyright. And Starbucks had done that. So when they brought the claim that the Dabachino rig was infringing on their intellectual property, they brought multiple claims. They brought a trademark infringement claim, and they also brought a copyright claim. And the damages from that were, granted, it was a default judgment against Evil Glass, but I believe it was about $500,000. So this is something to be taken seriously. I think for people who are, I think this should be representative that for people who are making their version of something that is a copyrighted material, there is grounds to have a pushback for that if you're selling it. I mean, if you're making it for your own personal use, no problem. But unless you have a licensing agreement in place with the entity that does own the copyright, if they wanted to come after you for infringing on the use of their copyright, they totally would have grounds to do so. So long as that copyright has been registered with the United States Copyright Office, because the Supreme Court changed that last year, that you can't bring a suit for copyright unless a registration has occurred.
Interesting.
So
okay. That makes sense.
That's one for people if they're out there making a line of, granted, with how much Rick and Morty has been knocked off, I think it would be hard to come after you, but or for you to stand out. But if you made a name for yourself on, say, doing that, and now you're selling pieces for $50,000, that's the type of scenario where I think someone would pay attention to it and be like, oh, hold on a minute, we have a problem with that. And you might get a cease and desist letter, or you might get something worse.
Yeah.
So,
and it's interesting too, man, looking across like the broad spectrum of those that do make items like that. For instance, the Disney merchandise, people are not touching that at all. Like they're afraid of the Disney per se, because they own fucking everything. But then you look at like the Pokemon, or Simpsons, or like things like that. Maybe even though Pokemon is geared towards kids, there's also a generation of adults that are like myself that grew up with it, so they're more nostalgic for it. But like the Simpsons or like Rick and Morty, things that are more adult focused in a sense per se of a children's cartoon, that's like seems to be the focus in the industry of those that are making that kind of product line. But still, it's all, like you're saying, it's all someone else's intellectual property.
Yep.
No matter what it is. So.
Which is problematic. I think, especially if you're building a business model on it, because that's your livelihood, and every time you make the good and sell it, you are just creating another piece of evidence against yourself.
Yeah.
Does that mean it's actually going to get litigated, or you are going to get prosecuted? Not necessarily, but if that is the model, you are living in that world where you're constantly infringing.
Yeah, makes sense.
And anyone who's going to go into what about parity? What about fair use? Because I know that anytime I talk about these things, that's always the rebuttal for someone. Really, if you're using it in a commercial sense, those are not on the table. So if you are reselling it for profit, that's the intent. It is very hard to claim parity in that sense. Fair use is almost 100% not on the table, because it's not in the public domain. You're not using it for an educational purpose. So yeah, just have that awareness. Like you're probably not able to get around those things right now. And I still wonder. I keep waiting for the day. I mean, I know that infringement occurs so often for copyrights, especially if it's something that's popular. Like I saw an ad yesterday that for $6 you can get 50 Rick and Morty stickers that are all different iterations of Rick and Morty. And I would be surprised if the creator of those stickers actually has a licensing agreement with, and I don't know who owns Rick and Morty off the top of my head. We'll just go with Adult Swim or Dan Harmon. But it's so prolific. But I do know that enforcement actions are brought because there are plenty of attorneys who have good livelihoods writing those. But I don't know the spectrum of how they assess how much of a threat is this to the business. And because trying to write cease and desist letters all day would be kind of pointless. But picking out really the bad apples where this is somebody who it's worth going after and making a point of. And understanding also that goes not only for, say, a glass blower, but if a glass shop is selling these goods, they would be liable for this issue as well. So pretty much everybody in the stream of commerce that's selling these things. Or we could go for another way. So a trademark, where a copyright is an artistic work fixed in a tangible medium that's an original artistic work. Trademark, which is, a source of origin indicator for a good or service. So it's a logo, a slogan, a word. Looking at that, if you're selling, what's a famous knockoffy thing? We'll go with a BMW logo that you're making repeatedly out of glass. Like that's what you're making. Both you and the end retailer could be accountable for trademark infringement if you are selling those. And I think a lot of people get these notions confused because they're an artist, they're creating this original thing, but just because you created it with your own hands, that does not give you a right to use something that's already in existence. I mean, for copyright, it's going to be called derivative work. For a trademark, it would just be called infringement. So I don't want to sound like the sky is falling because obviously these prosecutions are not consistently happening in the glass culture. I have seen, since I've been here last, I have seen some instances, and I have spoken with some glass blowers from a professional standpoint about assisting them with issues like this. But it's something that people should pay attention to. And if you're going to go out and work in glass, create your own style, create something new, create something different, because then you can own that. And actually, that dovetails nicely into since we spoke last, I assisted a glass blower in registering some federal copyrights for glass pipes.
Nice.
And so that's a viable option. I think a lot of people don't understand that. And that does not give you blanket protection for all glass pipes or, I registered for a Sherlock, so I own the entire design or shape of a Sherlock. That's not how it works. Copyright protection is actually pretty narrow in scope, but if you can hold up the work, the original work that's registered, and show that there's enough similarities between the knockoff work, then you actually have grounds for protection. And there's a number of different avenues for damages. So I'm a little confused why more glass blowers don't go down this path. But, because you get protection for your life and then 70 years afterwards. So this is actually something that if you have something that's really viable, and say you have children or you have a family you're trying to take care of, they can use this right even after you're deceased. So
was this something that was, in terms of like the labeling or the filing of it, was it labeled under something for cannabis ingestion, or was it just as a design model completely?
No, and so because with a copyright, original artistic work fixed in a tangible medium, copyrights actually don't really protect function.
Okay.
So you're not protecting it as a pipe, you're protecting it more as a sculptural work. Right. Because sculpture is artistic expression. And it really does have to rise to the level of really being deemed original. Because I actually have seen copyright registrations or applications denied on the grounds that they look too much like a pipe.
Huh.
And they just said, no, there's too much function there. So getting into this idea of craft or art that seems to constantly bubble up every few years, there really is apparently a legal standard, and the Copyright Office knows it when they see it.
Fascinating. That's good to know.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think what else is new. I went to the DFO this year. That was fun.
Yeah.
Hadn't been in a few years. I'm really impressed with what the work people are putting out still. I want to ask you this. Have you noticed that there seems to be a little bit of a downturn in the market for glass pipes right now?
Oh, completely, man. We've been talking about it for about a year and 2 years now. Yeah, it seems like the I guess the trade show markets, whatever circuit, got oversaturated. All the collectors that were buying glass either privately or through trade shows because they had like the opening day, vendor VIP shows or whatever. The flip market isn't really there anymore like it used to be. The rig has basically become the new hand pipe in terms of a production piece. Like the value of it's gone down because of how much is being created as like a thing, And I've been hearing stories of guys and gals that were like the quote unquote ballers in our industry who are struggling to pay their bills because they're not making you hear about it all the time in sports, these guys that make $100 million and they buy every fucking thing on earth and then they're broke and they can't live the lifestyle they want to live because they don't play football anymore. Right. So it's like, people aren't preparing themselves for the down times. It's a very up and down industry as it's always been, but it definitely is at a low. It seems like it's not at a low, but it's at a low right now for sure. Some people are struggling. It seems like a lot of artists are going back to more production work, the bread and butter stuff instead of the one-offs that they were doing before. Yeah, it's definitely been a very strange dichotomy that's been happening. I think it also has to do with certain areas within the country necessarily, maybe in terms of the legalization of certain things. I don't know if the electronic industry kind of put a little bit of a dent into it. With once the pens came out, and people weren't necessarily wanting to have a rig at home, or maybe they want to have both, or, the flowers kind of went away for a bit maybe, and then, you know what I mean? It's kind of this weird ups and downs.
I have a theory about that, and it is directly tied with legalization. Because dispensaries, for the most part, are the point of contact for cannabis now, especially for people who are new to the cannabis industry or for people who have moved away from the illicit market. They also usually sell rolling papers and pipes. Mm-hmm. And you are not having as much contact directly with glass shops or head shops.
Right, I completely agree.
And because the dispensaries, they care about their bottom line. And honestly, with the issues they have from 280E taxation, they have really hard margins. But I don't think there's been really a lot of education or push to educate people about American glass. Mm-hmm. And without that demand or that education, you're just going to have those places sell foreign imports that are $5 throwaways. Because they would prefer to have that break and at a low price point and come back and buy another one. But a lot of times the people who are buying those would never step foot into a glass shop because they don't have an association with it. And especially they don't have an education. So I'm wondering if the bubble, to a certain extent, was the glass industry created an echo chamber for itself about how well it was doing and how they're doing it. Like, it's amazing. And this is not to discount the work. I mean, the art that is coming out is phenomenal, but it did not keep up with the vehicle that was allowing it to grow, which was cannabis legalization.
Yeah. Yeah, and then my brother and I were talking about this a couple months back, and part of our thought too in the same thing was that, like you go to your dude's house to go pick up your stuff, and he's got his collection, and you're seeing these, because like my first introduction to buying a pipe was from a buddy of mine who I was grabbing a bag from back in the day, in the early 90s, and it was like the passing down from generation to generation on the education of the glass scene and the underground side of it, really, of what's being created. And now, like you're saying, like because for me, forever, I'm like, we're going to have generations upon generations upon generations. Every day, so many million people turn either 18 or 21 that can now buy my glass from me. But the case is that these people that the new generations aren't going, like you're saying, to the local smoke shops or going to the dispensary now. They're not going to the black market neighbor next door that's got a bunch of weed in his house and has got a nice glass collection, and he's educating them on this glass that he has. So they're not being really exposed to it like it used to be exposed to it. And,
Right.
I think that's kind of what it is, because, like, the guys that were selling the good pot were also the guys that were hyping up the glass at the same time, and that hype isn't, you know what I'm saying? And that hype isn't really there anymore.
No, it's true. And actually, I'll say for growing up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, because we both didn't have good cannabis or glass from when I was there, I did see some pretty sweet graphics bong collections, though, where it was like, whoa, you've got like an angry skull and like an evil jester.
Right.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
And different place, different ways.
Yeah, totally.
But I think that is an issue. And so I wonder, because I know trade shows like Champs have become incredibly relevant now for the cannabis industry, where really it was so much more focused just on head shops and glass in the past. Because I have clients now who are advertising there with both hemp goods or CBD goods, and in some cases trying to get a toehold with some cannabis stuff, depending on where Champs is located at the time.
Which they're here in Orlando right now.
Oh yeah, no, that's just finishing up, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, that I think there needs to be more of an intentional effort from the glass industry to try and break into the cannabis industry. And because I still go to plenty of cannabis events where there's not a great representation for American glass. And that, I think, is very unfortunate. Much in the same way that working with cultivators who cultivate amazing organic cannabis, then at times they're having a hard time selling their cannabis because the market doesn't have an education yet.
Right.
And so I think there's room for an upswing or a level up in the future. But I think it really is going to come. It's dependent on how much education is put into this to the consumer and an explanation of why this is important. I know I've heard rumors of more reality shows potentially being made. And if that occurs, I could see that as a great flashpoint, so long as they're done well, for capturing the attention of America, of being like, well, what is this? But it would have to be a show that is not just made to appeal directly to the glass industry. It would have to kind of cross that barrier between pop culture and then, and just art, and harness and play up the whole trend with cannabis legalization right now.
Yeah. Well, like the Blown Away show that just came out on Netflix. For me, I didn't really care for the show. I thought episodes were too short, and they kind of went over a lot of things that they just were not focused on what was actually happening within the show. Just a lot of bullshit. But it exposed the public around the world to the glass world. So now at Disney, I have guests coming in all the time, like, hey, have you seen this? And before they even finish what they're saying, I'm like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I can explain what I just told you, the same thing. But because they now have exposure to the glass world, period, I think the next evolution step is going to be a show like the guys and gals up at Cherry Glass that are doing the online tournament, the Tournament of Fire, which is a pipe tournament. Potentially something of that going to either Vice or going on to Netflix or some kind of thing like that, to expose the world to not a bunch of people sitting around smoking pot, but actually like, here's an actual thing going on here in the community of some amazing talented artists. I mean, 'cause I still feel like some of the most talented artists in the world are pipe makers right now, just because of what's being done.
Yeah, I think it's very timely, and I think in the concept of the zeitgeist of times, glass pipe makers are really, and I use this in my Oaksterdam presentation also, that they are the artistic expression of cannabis legalization. And I know that legalization, as much as we're moving forward, every state that I'm aware of is having a lot of difficulties without being able to do interstate transit. Next week, the Safe Banking Act is going to be voted on, or wait, no, it's this week, on Wednesday. And I was just talking to a friend who was out in DC doing some lobbying, and she was saying that from what she saw, she thinks this is going to be written into law.
Nice.
And that's going to change everything.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, access to banking has been an issue, a thorn in the side of the cannabis industry in California since 1996. So after that shifts, this is a massive game changer for the entire industry. Does this benefit the industry as a whole? Does this just mainly benefit larger companies, or is this going to be something that gives a leg up to small businesses when they're able to more safely manage their money? Or, I don't know if people will be granting loans for business loans anytime soon, but yeah, big shift on the horizon in that regard.
Well, hopefully too, it helps out because I don't use online transactions much except for like Zelle through my bank or whatever. But the PayPals or the whatever's, the Stripes of the world, what have you, that if you have anything on there that's a pipe or cannabis related, they're not going to either allow you to have an account or have the transaction denied or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I remember back in the early 2000s, I had a store write me a check and it had their smoke shop name on it, and the bank completely rejected me depositing it in my account because of what it said on the check and the name and the company it was coming from. So I'll be really curious with this happening, because I know it's been, when I was in Colorado, I was talking to some of the shop owners and they're saying the same thing. Like it's a lot of it's all cash-based businesses because they can't get a bank account anywhere.
Yep. And I think that changes a lot. I think
that's huge.
I hadn't even really thought about online transactions for ancillary products or really for CBD products, but that does open up a lot of possibility for businesses if they can do transactions of that nature. Because along that line, I do have a client who recently told me they're CBD focused, and they run an online store that they had their credit processing pulled because of that, and then had to scramble to find a new bank that would work with them. And I think when you have that level of disruption, especially when your business is going well, that kind of just freezes everything. And if you lose a customer, the chances that you're going to get them back is really, really difficult. There's enough options of trying to find what you're looking for, which I guess inevitably, if you follow it down the rabbit hole that far, you're probably going to end up back in the illicit market. But yeah, I'm optimistic about this. I think this is an essential step. I'm really curious about where the next election cycle goes, because I felt like the last major election cycle or presidential election was going to have cannabis as more of an issue, and it didn't. And I'm curious to see if that is going to be different this next round. It seems like during the Democratic debates that this is talked about a little bit, but I'm still kind of shocked that it's not more of an issue. Especially if you look outwards and you look at what's going on internationally, and countries are moving ahead. Canada's legalization, I know, has had a lot of hiccups as well. But even just the starting of doing an international exchange, I still see that as really exciting. I don't expect that to be worked out with the kinks for at least a few years, but at least some countries are already working on it, where America is still not at a point where that's even a viable option.
Right.
So,
the conspiracy part of me thinks because I had talked to some friends and they're like, if on the Democratic side of these guys and gals running for president, if they had anything that was like, we're for cannabis and we're for legalizing it, and that's like a main focus of their campaign, they're like, well, maybe Donald Trump will just legalize it across the board so that can't be a part of their campaign anymore, so Trump will get reelected again, kind of thing.
No, I could see. Well, it's a big bargaining chip.
Yeah, it's
like
huge.
For as much as, granted, you're ruffling the feathers of like how many, like the police union, prison union. There's a lot of money that's still backing it on the other side. And I also think that there's a lot of money in the pharmaceutical industry that is very opposed to where this is going. Especially so for Europe. So there's this thing called the NICE classification system with trademarks, right? There's classes 1 through 45. Yeah, that's right. And classes 35 through 45 are all services. Classes 1 through 34 are all goods. but and the NIS classification system, it's a harmonization, so all countries use similar descriptions for goods and services when they register a trademark. It makes asserting trademarks and registering into other countries a lot easier because you can kind of go from the manual and you're like, here's a description, this is accurate, let's use this. And as it stands, the closest you can get for something that would be appropriate for cannabis is hemp. And it's not even hemp as smokable flower, it's hemp as textiles, hemp as rope, hemp as fabric. And so this needs to be updated because we have a multi-billion-dollar industry premised on these goods, and there's no proper way to identify them. Now, the Canadian Intellectual Property Organization, or I think CIPO, they amended their identification manual earlier this year, that you can go and see what classes to register cannabis in, cannabis goods. And I have heard that internationally, starting in 2020, cannabis will be identified for the first time ever in the medical class in the NIS classification system. Oh. That still doesn't do a lot for recreational use or for, hash or cannabis concentrates, but it's a step forward.
Yeah, for sure.
That's actually one of the things that I'm considering doing my master's level research on, is how these things are being decided. Because to throw some numbers at you, because when I do research, I do get a hankering for statistics. So I've lectured in Prague twice now, and when I was preparing for my first lecture, I was digging around in the World Intellectual Property Brand Database, and starting in January 1st, 2015, I could find 638 trademark applications from all the countries that are members of WIPO that have their brand databases that can be searched, or their trademark databases that can be searched. So 638 that use the word cannabis in the description of goods or services. Now, by October 30th, 2017, when I was given my first presentation, you could find 1,188, right? Now, today, we'll go a few days ago, 9/14/2019, there's 12,126. So
crazy.
From January 1st, 2015 to 9/14/2019, it's an increase of about 11,488 trademark applications. So this has just exploded, which shows, especially because there's not accurate classes to register in, even though there have been what I would call customary international law being established, where countries have still picked classes. Like Canada has a very robust registration, America has a robust registration, even though you can't look in the handbook and figure out what classes to use. So I think that's going to be amended in the near future, which is one of the reasons why I think doing research into that area right now would be fascinating, just because the industry has exceeded the international standards. So that's an exciting thing. Another piece of research that kind of came off of that was doing a comparison of trademark registrations that use either the word cannabis or the word marijuana. So there's a trend here, and like Canada, on 9/14/2019, I could find 5,702 trademark applications using the word cannabis, 3,670 using the word marijuana. In the United States, it was 4,022 using the word cannabis, and only 1,843 using the word marijuana. Probably the most telling was in Mexico, which had 478 applications using the word cannabis, 4 using the word marijuana. And I noticed that there was just, especially Spanish-speaking countries were not using the word marijuana. It just was not as common. That I think if we stretch this out, give it 2 decades, the commonplace usage of the word marijuana is really going to decrease. I think especially in America or the United States, after we have federal legalization, that's going to fall out of vogue fairly quickly. So that's kind of some forward thinking, but kind of fascinating.
Yeah. Do you think it's the stigma that like bong or marijuana has attached to it on legal type of side of things?
Well, I think it's like the accurate way to talk about the plant.
Right. That's my
Because
thought too. Yeah.
yeah, it's cannabis sativa. It's
Yeah.
not marijuana.
Right.
Marijuana
Exactly.
is a word that was kind of created the boogeyman effect in the United
Right,
States.
and that's what I'm thinking. Like the stigma attached to marijuana, the name.
Yep. So,
Fascinating.
another one that just came up recently. The guys who made the cultivar Charlotte's Web have had what I believe to be the first plant patent granted for a cultivar that is low THC, high CBD, and that is groundbreaking for the industry. The idea that you can own a plant patent, and in order to register a plant patent, I believe you have to submit viable seeds. So the federal government is not going to accept seeds that are high in THC because those are paraphernalia. But so this had to have been a hemp cultivar that was low in THC, and then allows them through this registration to propagate just this one type of cultivar and then sell the seed stock. And if somebody was found to be in possession of that seed stock or plant stock without having paid the licensing agreement, they can be sued for patent infringement.
Interesting.
And that is wild. I mean, we have in the cannabis space, we've talked about, the theory of this on the horizon, but seeing it as no, this is happening, I think is very telling. I don't know if I beat this up last time I was on the show, but I am just going to make the bold claim. If you're saying the word strain and you're not saying the word cultivar, you are living in the Stone Age. Old or Stone Age. Take your pick. But the reason for this, and much like I think marijuana will get phased out over time, I think the word strain is going to get phased out over time too, because the word strain really has no official botanical meaning and has fallen out of favor in horticultural circles. The word strain is really used to discuss viruses. It's not really used to discuss plants or describe plants. And a cultivar, cultivar and varietals are. Cultivar is a plant that's cultivated for a specific purpose, right?
Yep.
A varietal is a naturally occurring variety that hasn't been previously identified that you might find in nature. Where you're like, oh, hey, that's a new orchid that we've never seen before, new varietal. Where this sounds kind of snotty and people are like, who really cares, man? The word, like, there's an association. It really doesn't mean anything. You can still talk about the plant, still describe it. The reason it does matter is because of it's a trademark rule from the Trademark Examination and Procedural Manual, TMEP Rule 1202.12, varietal and cultivar names. If you have a plant that their cultivar name, so it's the name of the plant, right? So it doesn't function as a trademark. You can't actually record it as a trademark. And if it is registered and it is found to be a cultivar name, you can't really assert your right as a trademark. And I'll go with, and this is like well-tested law in roses and fruits. Are you familiar with Honeycrisp apples?
Yes.
So I believe that patent is owned by the University of Minnesota. And as the story goes, they made the plant patent in the section for registering the plant patent in the cultivar section. They registered it as Honeycrisp apples, right? Or a Honeycrisp apple tree. And then they went to file a trademark for Honeycrisp apples. And mind you, patents and trademarks are both handled by the United States Patent Trademark Office, USPTO. When they went to file the trademark office said, well, what is the cultivar name of this plant? They said, well, it's Honeycrisp apple tree. They said, oh, well, then it doesn't function as a trademark. So I think they ended up getting a trademark under the name Honey Crunch. But this is just an example of all of these names that we're seeing on Leafly. So if strain is not the appropriate way to talk about these things, and it really doesn't have a horticultural meaning, what are those? My thought is those are probably cultivars. And if those are cultivars, those probably don't qualify for trademark protection. So then the idea of trying to own that exclusively, especially where you're going to say, hey, I own this genetic stock, becomes really precarious. That's going to get fleshed out from a legal standpoint pretty substantially in the next few years.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Because, and one of the ways that I know that this is a hot button issue and is not going to be ignored is I was doing some research on some of the original trademarks filed for hemp cigarettes, right? So arguably you should be able to get a registration on hemp cigarettes so long as the hemp is consistently 0.3% or less THC by dry biomass. I know I keep saying that and it sounds probably annoying, but that whatever, it's the standard. But part of the procedure of reviewing the trademark application was to do a cultivar check. And I think this is going to bite a number of businesses in the ass, personally. Because I see some pretty outrageous claims about people claiming what they own and what they can do with it, especially in California.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, it kind of makes me think about the whole Girl Scout cookie thing, the branding of the quote unquote,
Totally.
the cultivar strain of the,
Right.
of the Girl Scout cookies. And then the Girl Scouts of America are like, fuck you guys, you cannot use that name. So,
that was serious. I don't know
Yeah.
if that happened before or after the last time I was on, but they sent 2 cease and desist letters one to a dispensary in Los Angeles and one to a dispensary in Oakland. And they followed up with the one in Oakland because they saw one more posting where the Oakland dispensary tried to clean everything up and they thought they'd done a good job. But there was like one last board that still had it on there. And they had a subsequent point of contact that's another thing. If anyone is working in a space where they're getting creative with trademarks and it's an existing trademark, and you're trying to weedify it, or hey, if I just change a little bit of it, it's now mine and it's cannabis focused, don't do that. Really, just seriously, do not do that. You're going to be working against yourself for the time and money and energy that you're spending. And it might not come up for a year or two down the road, but depending on who you are going to bat against, the idea of winning is going to be potentially next to impossible, and you might just end up owing another company a ton of money. So, last thing that I really, from an IP standpoint, that I want to bring up, have you ever heard of an appellation of origin?
It's familiar.
Okay. So if I said Napa Valley, right?
Mm-hmm.
Area where you have an association of wine, you assume that wine grown there probably is good. If I said, okay, you have the option between drinking some Napa Valley wine or some Temecula wine, you might have an innate pull to be like, okay, well, Napa Valley, it's probably better because there's an association that I have with it.
Right.
Well, when California legalized, they allowed in their law to start creating areas of appellation of origin for cannabis, which is new and exciting. I feel very flattered. That's one of the nicest professional things that's happened to me in regard that I was asked to sit on this board or this kind of think tank with the California Department of Food and Agriculture and work on this project. And I am passionate about it because I think it's going to preserve and honor some of the small farms in the Emerald Triangle in California, and it's a lifeline for some of the small farms, especially that have a maybe multi-generational tradition steeped in cannabis in those areas. And the regulations for it won't probably come out for another 2 or 3 months, or at least the outline of the regulations. But from doing research internationally, there currently are no appellations of origin, or the sister to this is the geographic indicator. There are none that I could find for cannabis that exist in the world. So what California is about to do is very timely and very trend-setting. In the United States, appellation of origins are only currently used for wine. There is an international treaty called the Lisbon Treaty of Appellation, which we are not signatories to. But in other countries, appellation of origin can be used for other products. It's not just wine focused. For doing a presentation recently where I was doing research with this, Mexico, they're arguably their most famous and granted this is a geographic indicator, is tequila.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, no, I'm saying that wrong. It is an appellation of origin. It's tequila. But there was another product. There was some feathers that are also on their appellation list. I know Spain has some salted pork that it qualifies for an appellation of origin.
Yeah.
And Israel has some oranges. So it really looks at the holistic. The good made here has unique traits because it reflects the nature that it's created in, and there's usually a long-standing tradition that goes into the making of the goods.
Yeah, it's because I know you're talking about like the Spain and the pork, because I remember my fiance and I were at a restaurant the other night, and they had this specific pork on the menu, and I had never heard of it before, and it was forever and ever it was illegal to be imported into this country because it wasn't regulated by the FDA or whatever. And it's super expensive. It's like I don't know, it was like a 7-year or 8-year aged meat. These pigs are treated like babies. They're pampered and fed the best food on earth and everything else. And then all like olives and all kind of crazy shit, but they couldn't import this into our country until just recently. And this one restaurant literally has about $5 million of this meat hanging up for you to see visibly within the restaurant. Like they're just flexing their muscles now, because they can.
It's interesting because there's aspects of cheeses that are like that too.
Right, exactly.
Where some of the procedure for creating cheeses, and this is the thing with appellation of origin, it has to create, at least through the Lisbon Treaty, it has to be created through a certain process that is identified when the appellation of origin is granted from a legal perspective. And if you create the product without following those guidelines, you don't get to use the appellation of origin. And so for some cheeses, if there's like an unpasteurized or there's an aging process that might run afoul to the FDA, it's probably a good that you will not ever see in the United States, even though it might be consumed as a delicacy in some other parts of the world. So, yeah, it's that's an interesting one. I'm really excited about it. I think applications have to be accepted starting in 2021. So I would assume in the course of the next year, most people are going to hear a lot more about this issue.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And it makes total sense, like you're saying, like in terms of areas of origin and cultivation and long terms of generational, aspects of growing this specific branch, strains or cultivars, like you're saying.
Cultivars, yep.
Yeah.
And it gets down even into the terroir is, and that word is associated with the flavor of the product taking on specific flavors from the area that it was produced in, or characteristics of it.
Yeah, which makes sense, like a wine, like the soil that's being used and everything else.
Exactly. Or is it are the wine stock grown by a riverbed, and maybe it has like a stony flavor to it, which also is that's how you talk about the flavoring of wine, is the typicity of it. I learned a lot about wine. There's actually a fascinating attorney named Richard Mendelson, who I think years from now, when California looks back at the appellations of origin program they set up, Richard Mendelson is going to be the attorney who everyone should tip their hat to, because he's made a career doing appellations of origin for wine. And this attorney sat on the CDFA board also. And it was a pleasure to listen to him speak. The man is a genius. He's fascinating. He's written a few different books on appellation of origin. He owns his own vineyard, and he lived in France for a long time, just studying wine. So beyond just being a great attorney, his depth of knowledge about this issue, and then trying to bring it over to apply it to cannabis, was just fascinating.
Yeah,
and to
awesome.
Watch him do comparisons. Oh yeah, and I was so happy that there was somebody who had that depth of knowledge in the room to talk, where it was like, okay, explain this more. So, yeah, that's an exciting thing. I think people should start paying attention to California in that regard, because I think the rest of the world, as cannabis legalization moves forward, is going to pay attention to this. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see other states, especially on the West Coast, or maybe Colorado for the most part is mainly indoor cultivation, but I would say Southern Oregon would be a great region to focus on. I know that there's some areas in, I want to say, Kentucky that are known for cannabis cultivation, that maybe down the road they would file for an appellation of origin. But and ideally, after we have federal legalization, that maybe geographic indication would be supported by the federal government for cannabis cultivated in these areas.
Yeah, yeah, and Kentucky makes sense with the different bourbons and stuff coming out of there based on where the stock is grown.
Yep. So,
Man, that's so cool.
no, exciting stuff. I think that's pretty much it for me right now, though. And I will work on focusing on some international issues so the next time I come on, I can talk a little bit more about what I'm seeing develop from the international side.
Yeah, I would love that, especially with all the things happening within our industry that, artists are going overseas to Europe and everybody else to teach classes and competitions happening and all kind of cool shit going on within the pipe world.
I was seeing that on Dosh's Instagram, that I think he just was doing another European pipe classic.
Yeah.
And to see the amount of people from different countries was really fascinating. Like, I mean, Russian glass blowers, and yeah, I think this is growing. And that interplay, I think, is only going to increase more and more as cannabis legalization is accepted throughout the world. So
yeah, thank goodness.
Yep, agreed. So, hey, thank you again for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm always a fan to be a guest, and thanks for doing this work, because I think you're putting some really good information out there.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you taking one for the team in a sense, putting yourself out there, because it's not easy to go out there and fight in this industry that we've been all fighting for centuries in a sense.
Well, it's easy in the sense that when you're on the right side of history, and this is where I feel really grateful, is putting energy, because cannabis shouldn't be illegal. Mm-hmm. Glass pipes shouldn't be illegal. It's just nonsensical. So putting energy into work like that, it doesn't feel, hey, I still have frustrating days, don't get me wrong, but as a whole, I feel very fortunate for this time and place in the world, and to have the skill set that I do, and to be able to participate the way I do, because I know that we're right.
Yeah.
And that will show it's shown itself, and given enough time, it will be the paradigm shift and it'll be adopted. And so I feel very fortunate. And if anything, this is a reason why to keep pushing harder right now, is to move this forward as fast as we can. And this is one of the reasons why I'm getting this degree in Europe, is I want to be able to go directly to the source for the international organization that manages intellectual property and say, yeah, I'm doing cannabis research. And I know from seeing I'm the only person from the United States in the class. I'm one of two people from North America, but I know there's going to be other classmates who they're from countries where cannabis legalization, they don't even have medical cannabis.
Yeah.
The idea of legalization isn't even on the radar yet. And I think having a dialogue at that level is really important, because I do think that those set the little fires that become something bigger.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, you're inspiring. That's awesome.
Cool. Well, hey, thank you again for having me on the show, and I'm looking forward to next time I'll be here.
Yeah, okay. Man, you want to tell us where we can find you and your contact information?
Oh, yeah. You can find me at cannabislaw.law on the web, or hemplaw.law. And my office is out of San Francisco. My email address would be Zimmerman, Zimmerman, at cannabislaw.law. Or my phone would be 415-230-5308.
Awesome. And I'll have all the links in the show notes for you all. And thanks again, brother. Appreciate you so much.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. Have a great night. Take it easy. This episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show is brought to you by The Flow magazine. Since its inception, the focus of The Flow has been to provide a bond among members of the lampworking community. In every issue, you can enjoy great content with the hottest artists and cutting-edge techniques using the latest industry products. These features, along with the continuation of our Women in Glass edition, Glasscraft Emerging Artist Awards, inspiring gallery showcases, dynamic general interest articles, as well as health and safety information, make The Flow the leading international lampworking journal. For more information or to subscribe to The Flow, go to theflowmagazine.com. That's theflowmagazine.com.